My name is Elena, and at 2:17 in the morning, my world shattered in the most public way possible. The sound of my bedroom door being kicked open still lives in my bones. 1 second I was asleep, the next, blinding white flashlight beams cut through the darkness like knives. Two police officers stormed in with weapons drawn, shouting commands that blurred together in the chaos. I stood perfectly still in the middle of my room, in nothing but an old t-shirt, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. But my face stayed calm. I looked past their dark uniforms and saw them standing there in the hallway. My own parents, arms crossed, shoulders relaxed, wearing expressions of pure satisfaction. My mother's lips were curved in a small, victorious smile. My father gave a single approving nod, and right beside them was my younger sister, Claire, holding her phone up high like a trophy. She was live streaming everything. I could hear her voice, sweet and excited, reading comments out loud. Look at her face, y'all. Finally getting what she deserves. Over 1 million people watching, laughing, commenting, celebrating my downfall in real time. The officer grabbed my wrist roughly and snapped the cold metal handcuffs around it. Elena Harper, you're under arrest for fraud and embezzlement of family trust funds. I didn't fight. I didn't cry. I didn't even speak. I simply held out my other wrist voluntarily and let the second cuff click shut, because I already knew how this story was going to end. They thought this was their victory night. They had no idea it was the beginning of the end for them. As they walked me out of my own house, the flashing red and blue lights painted the walls I had painted myself just last year. Claire kept the livestream going, zooming in on my face, narrating every step like it was entertainment. My parents stood on the porch, waving at neighbors who had come out to watch the spectacle. Their daughter, the difficult one, finally being taken away. I kept my eyes forward the entire time. Inside, my mind was completely clear. I had spent months preparing for this exact moment. Every camera hidden in my house, every document carefully placed, every digital trail I had intentionally left. It was all leading to this. Hey, if you've ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you most, I want you to breathe with me right now. You're not crazy. You're not alone. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay quiet until it's time to speak. They put me in the back of the patrol car. The door slammed shut. As we pulled away, I glanced back one last time and saw Claire still filming, laughing into her phone. My mother blowing a sarcastic kiss. I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, it's almost over. And it was, just not the way they imagined. Let me take you back 3 months earlier, to a quiet afternoon that changed everything. I had driven across town to my grandfather's lawyer's office for the official reading of his will. The conference room smelled like polished wood and fresh coffee. I was the last one to arrive. My parents and Claire were already seated on one side of the long mahogany table, their postures stiff, eyes sharp. I sat down opposite them, trying to ignore the heavy tension in the air. Grandpa had always been my person. The one who listened when my parents didn't. The one who told me I was enough exactly as I was. So, when the lawyer cleared his throat and began reading, I wasn't expecting what came next. 80% of my estate, including the investment accounts, the family lake house, and the trust fund, I leave solely to my granddaughter, Elena Harper. The silence that followed was suffocating. I felt my mother's gaze burning into me. My father's jaw clenched so tight I heard it click. Claire let out a soft, bitter laugh under her breath. The lawyer continued, explaining the terms calmly, but I barely heard the rest. All I could focus on was the way my family was looking at me. Not with love or even surprise, but with something colder. Entitlement mixed with resentment. Like I had stolen something that belonged to them. After the meeting ended, my mother pulled me aside in the hallway. Her voice was low, controlled, but dripping with venom. "You know this isn't right, Elena. Your grandfather wasn't in his right mind these last few years. We're family. We should share this." I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time I saw it clearly. The love I had always tried so hard to earn had conditions, and I had just become an obstacle to their lifestyle. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the way they exchanged glances during the reading. The subtle nods. The way Claire immediately started texting someone under the table. Something deep in my gut told me this wasn't over. It was only beginning. In the weeks that followed, the subtle changes started. Little things at first. My mother calling more often, asking innocent questions about my job and finances. Claire accidentally bumping into me at the grocery store near my house. My father offering to help me manage the inheritance. Each interaction felt slightly off, like a performance. Then the digital red flags appeared. Failed login attempts on my bank accounts. Emails I didn't send showing up in my sent folder. A withdrawal request I never made. I sat at my kitchen table one night, staring at my laptop screen, heart heavy, and realized they weren't just disappointed. They were actively working against me. Most daughters would have confronted their family. They would have cried, argued, tried to fix the relationship. I didn't. Instead, I opened a new notebook and started writing everything down. Dates, times, conversations, screen recordings. I decided that if they wanted to treat me like an enemy, I would protect myself like one. I remember sitting on my porch that evening, wrapped in Grandpa's old sweater, drinking tea, and watching the sunset. A quiet sadness settled over me. Not anger yet, just grief for the family I thought I had. But beneath that grief was something else. A calm resolve. I wasn't going to let them take what Grandpa had trusted me with. And more importantly, I wasn't going to let them take my peace. If you've ever sat alone after realizing your own family sees you as a threat instead of a daughter, I want you to know that the pain you feel is valid. But it's also the beginning of your freedom. That's exactly where I was standing when I made the decision that would change all of our lives. The weeks after the will reading felt like walking through a fog I couldn't quite shake. At first, it was small things. A text from my mother asking if I had looked into the trust fund yet. Claire showing up at my favorite coffee shop by coincidence, asking casual questions about my job security. My father offering to review my financial statements because family should help each other. Each conversation left a strange taste in my mouth. Then the real signs started appearing. One morning, I received a security alert. Someone had tried to access my main investment account from an IP address just a few blocks from my parents' house. 2 days later, I found my desk drawer at home slightly out of place. Nothing missing, but the papers inside had been moved. That same week, Claire asked to borrow my laptop for 10 minutes while visiting. I let her, but only after I had already installed monitoring software. I didn't say anything. I just watched, documented, and felt my heart break a little more with each new piece of evidence. One rainy evening, I sat in my car outside their house after a forced family dinner. Through the window, I could see them laughing together in the living room. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of it. The loneliness of realizing you're the outsider in your own family. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had chosen money over blood. The realization hurt more than any betrayal I had experienced before. But pain has a way of sharpening your focus. I reached out to Sophia, an old colleague from my corporate investigation days who I trusted completely. We met in a quiet park far from my neighborhood. Over coffee, I showed her everything I had gathered. She listened without interrupting, then looked at me with steady eyes and said, "Elena, They're building a case against you. Slowly, smartly. If you don't act, they will destroy you legally and financially. That conversation was the turning point. I stopped being the naive daughter trying to earn their love. I became the woman who would protect herself with the same intelligence they were using against me. From that day forward, I changed my routines. I installed hidden high-definition cameras covering every main area of my house. I created secure cloud backups that only I could access. I started leaving carefully prepared decoy documents in obvious places. Papers that looked important but would lead any investigation straight into a dead end. All while continuing to play the role of the polite, slightly distant daughter at family gatherings. I smiled when they smiled. I answered their questions. I never let them see the woman who was now 3 steps ahead. There were nights I cried in the shower so no cameras or microphones could catch it. Nights when the loneliness felt crushing. But every morning I woke up with the same quiet determination. I would not let them win. If you've ever had to pretend everything was normal, while knowing your own family was plotting behind your back, I want you to know how incredibly strong you are for carrying that weight. I see you. And I promise, staying silent doesn't mean you're weak. Sometimes it's the most strategic thing you can do. By the end of that second month, I had enough evidence to know their full plan. Frame me for embezzlement, have me arrested, then petition the court to declare me unfit so they could take control of the entire inheritance. They thought they were being clever. They had no idea I was preparing something much quieter and far more effective. The decision to fight back quietly changed how I moved through the world. I started waking up earlier, before the sun rose, making my coffee in the dark kitchen while reviewing footage from the hidden cameras. Sophia and I spoke in coded language during our calls. We built layers of protection I never thought I would need. Encrypted drives, false trails, and a complete digital backup of every suspicious interaction. One weekend, I told my family I was going on a short solo trip. In reality, I spent 2 full days installing additional surveillance and meeting with a private forensic accountant who taught me exactly how to create documents that would look legitimate but collapse under real scrutiny. Every night, I returned home, exhausted but clearer in my purpose. There were moments of deep doubt. One evening, I stood in front of the mirror after another tense dinner with my parents and whispered, "Am I really doing this? Turning my family into adversaries?" The answer that came back was surprisingly gentle. "They made their choice first. You're only protecting yourself." I began leaving decoy folders on my desk. Financial summaries with just enough believable numbers to tempt them. I knew Claire had made a copy of my house key months earlier. I let her use it. Every time she snuck in while I was out, the cameras caught everything. Every photo she took, every document she scanned. It was all recorded. The loneliness during this period was profound. I stopped sharing casual updates with friends because I didn't want anyone accidentally tipping them off. I spent many evenings alone on my porch, wrapped in Grandpa's old blanket, thinking about the little girl who once believed her family would always have her back. But with every piece of evidence I gathered, that lonely girl grew quieter and a stronger woman took her place. A woman who understood that real love doesn't come with conditions or hidden agendas. Sophia flew in one weekend to help me review everything. We sat at my dining table surrounded by printed documents and multiple laptops. She looked at me across the table and said softly, "You know this is going to hurt them when it comes out, right?" I nodded. "I know, but they left me no other path." That night, after she left, I sat in complete darkness in my living room and made a promise to myself. I would see this through with calm, not rage, with strategy, not emotion. I would win by being the person they never expected me to be. Patient, prepared, and completely in control. I also started preparing emotionally. I wrote letters I never planned to send. One to my mother, one to my father, one to Claire. Getting the pain out on paper helped me release it. By the time I finished, I felt lighter, clearer, ready. If you're in the middle of building your own silent armor right now, I want you to know it's okay to grieve the family you thought you had. It's okay to feel scared, but every small step you take to protect yourself is proof that you are stronger than their betrayal. By the end of those months, my trap was nearly complete. All that remained was giving them the final push they needed to walk right into it. And they did exactly that. The final phase began exactly 72 hours before the raid. I printed a thick folder of carefully fabricated financial records, transfers, offshore accounts, forged signatures. They looked convincing enough to fool a casual glance, but would never survive a real forensic audit. I left the folder sitting openly on my home office desk, right where Claire would find it during her next visit. That same afternoon, Sophia arrived in a rental truck. We put on a very public performance, loading old furniture while chatting loudly about me, moving some things to safety. In reality, she was quietly taking my genuine documents and original trust papers to a secure location outside the state. Before she drove away, Sophia looked at me with genuine concern. "Are you sure you want to go through with this, Elena? Once they pull the trigger, there's no going back." I took a slow sip of my coffee and met her eyes. "I'm sure they need to commit a clear federal crime. Only then can this end properly." After she left, I turned off most of the lights in the house and sat in the quiet darkness of my living room. I remember the way the clock ticked on the wall, the distant sound of crickets outside. I wasn't afraid, I felt ready. I knew exactly what would happen next. Claire would find the folder. She would share it with our parents. They would contact the shady accountant they had been working with, and together they would file a police report accusing me of fraud, hoping to trigger the clause in the will that would transfer control to them if I became legally incapacitated. I let them believe they were winning. The next 2 days passed in a strange, calm tension. I went to work normally. I answered my mother's texts like nothing was wrong. I even had dinner with them on the final night, watching as they struggled to hide their excitement. Claire could barely contain her smirk. That last night, before going to bed, I stood in front of Grandpa's photo in the hallway and whispered, "I'm doing this for both of us." I slept surprisingly well. At 2:17 a.m., when the police kicked open my door, I was ready. Every camera in the house was recording. Every digital trail was in place. The trap I had spent months building was finally springing shut, not on me, but on them. As the handcuffs clicked around my wrists and Claire's livestream captured my supposed downfall, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Because I knew the real story was just beginning. The ride to the police station was quiet. I sat in the back of the patrol car, watching the familiar streets pass by, my mind steady. When we arrived, they led me through the brightly lit intake area. The smell of stale coffee and cleaning chemicals filled the air. I emptied my pockets without being asked, and stood patiently as they began processing me. The duty officer looked tired as he typed my information into the system. He hit enter, expecting just another routine case. Instead, his screen suddenly flashed bright red. The entire terminal locked up. A warning banner appeared. Federal Protected Identity. Restricted access. His face went pale. He stared at the monitor, then at me. What the hell? 15 minutes later, the door to the holding area burst open. My boss, Director Marcus Hale, head of the State Financial Crimes Division, walked in, still wearing the same suit he'd probably had on since yesterday. The local officers immediately stepped back. Director Hale looked at the handcuffs on my wrists, then at the frozen computer screen, and let out a long breath. "Alina, you really let it go this far?" I gave him a small, tired smile. "It was the only way, sir." He turned to the local chief who had rushed in behind him. "This case is now under federal jurisdiction. Release her immediately. And someone get those cuffs off her." As the metal fell away from my wrists, I felt the shift in the room. The same officers who had dragged me from my home now treated me with cautious respect. Director Hale pulled me into a private room and closed the door. "I've been reviewing the files you sent me over the last few months," he said quietly. "This is solid, Elena. Extremely solid." I handed him the small encrypted drive I had kept hidden in my jacket. "Everything is on here. Every camera feed, every email, every financial trail. They thought they were framing me. They actually committed multiple federal crimes." He nodded slowly, respect clear in his eyes. "You could have come to us earlier." "I needed them to cross the line themselves," I replied. And they did. Outside that room, the local department was in chaos. Calls were being made. Teams were being mobilized. What my family thought was their perfect victory was rapidly turning into their worst nightmare. As I sat there waiting for the next steps, I allowed myself one quiet moment of satisfaction. Not joy, just the calm knowledge that the truth was finally catching up to them. The trap had worked. While I sat in the quiet interview room at the station, everything unfolded at once. Federal tactical teams moved in perfect coordination. 5 unmarked SUVs surrounded my parents' house just as the sun was beginning to rise. Inside, Claire was still live streaming from the living room, celebrating their victory with my parents. They were drinking champagne, laughing, and reading hateful comments about me to their growing audience. The front door exploded inward with a deafening crash. "FBI, hands where we can see them!" Agents in tactical gear flooded the house. Claire's phone was snatched from her hands mid-sentence. The live stream cut to black, but not before millions of viewers watched her smile vanish in real time. My parents' faces shifted from triumph to pure shock as they were pushed against the wall and handcuffed. At the same moment, another team stormed the accountant's office downtown, seizing computers and files before he could destroy anything. I watched the coordinated operation unfold on monitors at the station. Director Hale stood beside me, arms crossed. "You built a masterpiece here, Elena." By morning, my family was in federal custody. The evidence I had gathered, combined with their own overconfident actions, painted an airtight picture. Fraud, conspiracy, attempted embezzlement, false police reports. The list was long and devastating. Claire's public livestream became national news overnight. The same people who had mocked me hours earlier were now flooding the internet with shocked reactions and calls for justice. The humiliation my family had tried to inflict on me reversed completely. I didn't feel happiness in that moment, just a deep, quiet sadness for what our family had become and relief that it was finally over. 14 months later, I sat in the back of the federal courtroom as the final sentences were read. My mother received 7 years. My father received 9. Claire got 4 years plus permanent restrictions on social media and financial matters. The accountant took a plea deal and testified against them. Every piece of evidence I had carefully gathered held up perfectly. I didn't go to watch them being taken away. I had already said my goodbyes in my own heart months earlier. Instead, I drove to the small cabin I bought with part of my grandfather's inheritance. It sits beside a quiet lake surrounded by trees. The same kind of peaceful place Grandpa used to take me when I was young. I sat on the porch that first evening of true freedom, wrapped in his old sweater, watching the sun set over the water. The anger had faded. The grief remained, but it felt softer now, like an old scar instead of an open wound. I had learned that protecting myself didn't make me cold. It made me free. If you're watching this and you're still trapped in a toxic family dynamic, please hear me clearly. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to set boundaries. You are allowed to walk away from people who only love you when it benefits them. Family is not just blood. It's safety, it's respect, it's love without conditions. Type the word boundaries in the comments if this story touched something deep inside you. I read every single one. Thank you for sitting with me through all of this, for witnessing my pain, my silence, and my quiet strength. You reminded me I was never truly alone. This chapter is closed now. A new one is beginning. One where I finally get to live for myself. Take care of your heart. Protect your peace. And never forget that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay calm while the truth does the rest.